we can just repeat that as too, because I think we know the answers to probably a lot of the questions that'll be asked. So
I hope
think
so.
we'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, we can certainly offer our perspective on how it occurs and how it happens with us.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Oh, somebody started the broadcast.
Maybe Samuel did.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Sam. We're being recorded now. So I think we still have about a minute before we start, and I never can tell who's on. So we'll just give it a little while to chat. I think Rob's supposed to join at some point.
Oh, crap. What did I do?
You started
the recording.
Cool.
Yeah, the broadcast has started. It looks like Rob is in the chat. I don't know if you guys can see the chat, but the chat is working.
Okay.
Let's see.
Rob, I see the chat, but I don't see his comment.
There was a delay, I know, in a couple of the sessions for the chat, but on my end, I can see Rob, commented, and I just put our little general troubleshooting link in there.
So Rob, I don't know if you tried, but if you have to come in through the, I think it's called My Speaker. What's it called? My Speaking Schedule. That's the way you have to come in order to be heard. If you come in the other way, just through the breakout sessions, then you'll just. That's been my experience.
Correct. If you go to the main page, there should be like lobby, main stage, etc., and there's one that says My Speaking Schedule, so you'll want to click in through there.
Okay, so hopefully Rob heard that. I can let me type it too, just that way, because I know yesterday when I couldn't get in, people were saying stuff and I couldn't hear because I was busy trying to do a troubleshoot. So. Hey, there he is. Hi, Rob.
Thanks, guys. Let's see. Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. My microphone is on. Okay.
Yay. So we still have a little while, right? Oh, no, I guess we've started. we're off to a start. So we were just chit-chatting. I don't think, just so the panel knows, I don't think we can have our EPA as speakers at this point. Somehow we missed that opportunity, unfortunately, but they are here, I believe. I see Tim in the chat, Tim Wilhite, and Angela Mendiola was supposed to join, and I think Howard Kahan, not sure. So, but I'll go ahead and just get started. I'll share my screen pretty soon here, but just so you all know, we're in the Performance Partnership Grant Tribal Perspective session. And we have a tribal member panel here. And as I said, we were trying to get EPA staff on board to help answer questions, and they're just going to be able to type things in. So we'll just do the best we can with that. I think we'll be fine. I'm going to try to share my screen here.
You have a question in there, and I think that your question is going to be answered in Kerri's presentation. What's the difference, or define the difference between GAP and EPA? I mean, I'm sorry, I have a cold.
PPGs.
And PPG. I apologize.
Okay, can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, you're what?
The whole screen, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not your presentation, but your screen.
Yeah, I thought I just selected window versus whole screen. So let me try this again. So yeah, just on that same note, thank you, Nina, for pointing out that question. And if you guys, please feel free to help me out with those questions on the side. But the way we're going to do this is I'm going to go through, gosh darn it, I'm not finding. I'm going to go through the slideshow from beginning to end. And then after that, we're going to circle back to the slideshow and kind of go slide by slide, point by point, and let the panel members clarify things that are on there, add things to the bullet points. And then we could just do back and forth just like that from slide to slide. I think that should probably work out well. It's not that long of a slideshow if I can get it up. Let me try something else. I had this all worked out, you guys. I don't know why.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and partially answer Christian's question. So
Sure.
TAP is just one grant program. A performance partnership grant allows you to bring in more than one grant program under one umbrella. So for us, like we have general assistance program and we have our Clean Water 106 and 319 all under one program. And so it has one grant number. And the ability is to help reduce burden to a certain extent, but some of us don't necessarily see it as reduced burden. But for our fiscal, it's a reduced burden for them. You're able to move some money around a little bit. Oh, there's Kerri's screen. But we'll go into more detail with that just to give you a short, quick answer.
Great. No, that was good, Nina. I was actually going to ask one of you guys to explain what a PPG was to begin with, so that was perfect. So just a real quick introduction. My name's Kerri Vera. I'm from the Tule River Tribe. I'm one of the GAP co-leads, and I'm also one of the Central Cal representatives, one of 3 for the RTOC. Go down. Oh, it's going to do that. So we're going to we have a panel here. As you can see, we've got 3 tribal environmental directors that are going to be our PPG experts today from just their perspective, working with them. We're really lucky that these 3 came on board to talk and be open. They've got, decades of experience between all of them, and that's a good thing. So we have Samuel Elizondo. You want to introduce yourself real quick, Sam?
Hi, my name is Samuel Elizondo. I'm the environmental director here at Tule Mountain Rancheria for, how long has it been? It's been 8 years now. Before that, I worked for a previous tribe for 13 years. So like Kerri said, we got some experience in the tribal environmental field, and I'm here to help out as much as I can with PPGs.
Great, thanks, Sam. And Nina Hapner from Kashia Band of Pomo Indians.
Yes, so I've been with Kashia for 12 years and then other tribes. So been been working in environmental programs for quite some time. I think as long as Kerri, decades.
Yeah, and they're not that long.
Decades go by quickly. And I actually did not get into getting into PPG until I was here at Kashia. So we're just ending our first round of PPG. So we'll provide some experience like what we've had with it on our first round and entering into our second round. So
great. Thanks, Nina. And lastly, Rob Roy from La Jolla Band of Glissano Indians.
Thanks, Kerri. Well, that's who I am. My name is Rob. I'm the director of the Environmental Protection Office for the La Jolla Band of Glissano Indians, which is in Southern California. I've had the incredible honor and pleasure of working for the tribe for the last 19 years. And we are in our 2nd Performance Partnership Grant. We have our GAP program, our Clean Air Act 105 program, our Clean Water Act 106, 319 base, and 319 competitive grants. We have everything rolled into the PPG. So there we go.
Great. All right. Thanks, Rob. So we also had solicited a few EPA staff to join and be on kind of standby here in case there's specific questions that the panel may not be clear on, and the EPA could just answer from their perspective. Unfortunately, we did not get them in as speakers in time, and so I believe at least Tim is in the chat. I think Angela's probably planning to be there, and maybe Howard too. So. If when we get to questions specific to EPA, I know that they'll be willing to type those in the chat. So we'll keep an eye on that. So just kind of a little bit of a background to this. So there was a lot of talk at the different GAP work groups that we were at, or just even the RTOC, about whether or not there was a push for PPGs to tribes from EPA. Is EPA promoting this, or is this something that we're just hearing about? Is it different from region to region? So that's kind of what stirred this conversation. And so we decided to kind of dig a little deeper and find out what the pros and cons for PPGs were from the tribal perspective. So we know that EPA has come out with pros from that perspective, but we needed to hear from tribes on what the pros and cons of PPGs were from their experience. And so that's kind of what started this. And we had about 5 different tribes come forward, and they were willing to give their experience. And so I was able to gather that and put these the slides together. Is based on questions, answers, interviews, that kind of thing. And so hopefully at the end of this, tribes will have some questions answered and help them make a decision as to whether or not a PPG is a good idea for them. And then if there's tribes out there, of course, today that have experience, please feel free to speak up. So yeah, we had tribal testimonies, question and answers, and then this panel and others have given recommendations and advice with regards to PPGs. So I'm just going to go through some of the answers that we got regarding pros and cons, and then I'll go through the recommendations. So when the question was posed, why these specific tribes entered their PPGs, the most popular response was that it was easier to work their budgets when they were in PPGs. There was more budgetary flexibilities and ability to move funding around. And I'm going to go through these quick because we're going to come back and let the panel be more specific. More pros. The reporting was easier. There was less paperwork. The reduced match was saving tribes money. And as we've heard that the match, I believe, has been waived, and we can go into the process with some input from EPA on that later. The ease of applying for a single grant versus 3, 4, 5 different grants. There's just one budget, one media control, one application. More pros, PPG pros, were we don't have to ask about line item changes. The percentage is higher, and I believe this was kind of to the other previous comment about being able to move funds around from line item to line item, and you can move more funds, I think, but we'll let the panel address that later. Fiscal only has to do one SF424 for 3 grants instead of 3 different ones. When making last minute changes or rolling in new or other grants, the PPG allows this with just an amendment. So it sounds like it's simpler to add. Some of the cons that we came across, challenges that tribes face. The most popular response was that there's only one lead project officer for the PPG, and this can be difficult if that project officer is not familiar with, say, the different grants that are in there. Maybe they specialize in just one and not the others. So there's a learning curve there. And specifically, GAP kept coming up. So maybe you have a project officer for your PPG that is more familiar with water, for instance, and not very familiar with GAP. And so there's some communication challenges there, it sounds like. More cons. Some more popular responses was just the general misunderstanding of indirect costs and the process for that. PO's not familiar with how to calculate that. Reporting to different media and associated time lapse with each response. So the different media, meaning the various grants that are from different medias, and there's just the lapse of response when you're putting the reporting in and getting in feedback. And we'll let the panel talk about that a little bit more. And then some were even saying the reporting is not necessarily less. You're still reporting on every grant. There's no way out of that. And so that's still there. More cons. Other responses are no flexibility to end individual grants. So just that challenge to try to get them all ending and wrapping up at the same time. So there was some good discussions about that we'll go into again. It sounds like EPA can be flexible on that, having soft closeouts possibly. Budgeting challenges, providing individual and combined master budgets. So, so it sounds like maybe there's individual budgets being developed, but then at the end also having to combine those. And so you're making multiple budgets, but we'll let the panel go into detail on that. Closing out PPGs can be very difficult, and I think that goes back to the ending, that the closeout date having to all come at once. And then one tribe even said there has been no disadvantages with their PPG, so they loved it. They love it. And so here's some suggestions that the panel came up with, or that the tribes came up with for improvement. One suggestion was to have a standalone PPG section or division within the region for tribes, so a one-stop shop to come ask questions and get things addressed. Allow all tribal grant programs to be added to the PPG if they're desired, not just those that are on the list. So those that don't know, there is a list of allowable grants that can go into a PPG, and so that open that up. Allow a soft closeout of each individual grant, not requiring all of them to get done at the same time. And that would help out with the closeout. And then making the grants.gov easier to manage. So if you're only doing one PPG upload or reporting in grants.gov, you're not doing 3 or 4 individuals. You're only visiting it like once a year. And grants.gov, as we all know, is not so user-friendly sometimes. And so there's a learning curve, and just making that more user-friendly would be helpful with managing PPGs. And then it's easiest when grouping similar media. So this just goes back to the point of having different media, different grants in the PPG. So for instance, grouping together 2 water grants in a PPG might be smoother than doing 2 waters and throwing a gap in there, making it a little bit more challenging. Not that it can't be done, but just some suggestions. And let's see, recommended PPG. So the tribes were asked if they would recommend a PPG to other tribes, and the most popular response of the tribes was yes, they would definitely recommend it to other tribes. And I just wanted to put out some of the other responses. They would recommend that tribes look into PPGs, understand the process, understand the functions before moving forward in one, review the regulations and the terms. One tribe said, just, try it for a year, give it a test drive, right? And see if you like it. And if you don't like it, it's easy to get out. And then another suggestion is grouping similar medias together. So if for starting out, maybe just group your waters in there and put those and see how it works. And then this was just the overlying hanging question. Did EPA push PPGs? Did EPA suggest the tribes? Did EPA suggest a PPG? And 20% said no. 40% said no, but they influenced their decision. And 40% said yes. So it does look like it's something that EPA, at least for the tribes question, where it was, I don't know about pushing, but suggesting and kind of helping drive it to that point. But let me see if I have it. Oh, yeah. But it seemed like the tribes overall like them. They're saying that the PPG is easy to enter into, and all the tribes that we talked to have stayed in their PPGs. They haven't, tried them and not liked them and got out. So overall, it seems to be a good experience for them. That's just my last slide. So I'm going to pause right there and just see if there's any burning questions before we go back and kind of review some of those answers. And any comments from the panel? I know you guys will have comments when we go back.
Yeah. So Christian asked us that their tribe currently has GAP Clean Water 106 and 319 and is GAP under the umbrella of the PPG, and I put in there yes, because we have GAP Clean Water Act 106 and 319 under a PPG.
Okay, and then so I was going to ask any EP if Tim's out there, or Angela, if maybe there's a link or something that people could go to for the list of grants that are eligible in PPG. So I'm going to go back to the slides. I'm going to go back to the beginning and see if there's anything you guys wanted to clarify.
As you're getting back there, Kerri, I thought maybe I'll just jump back in and address Christian's follow-up question. which was, so does that mean we only report one quarterly report, or do we submit 3 separate reports for each grant? One thing that we've kind of noticed is that those of us that participated in this session and compiling all this information about PPGs is that there are some differences in how different tribes, or it seems like different project officers, manage the PPG. But my experience, at least, so I can only speak from my experience has been that when we submit our quarterly report, we still have to submit a report for each of the programs that's within a PPG. We use Microsoft OneNote for our reports, and just there's a separate tab for each of our grants. Other people may do electronic reporting, or do just submit other types of reports. But yes, you do still have to report on each of the accomplishments in each of your grants. Each grant has its own separate commitments and components and goals and deliverables, and you do have to report on all of that.
Right. And so I'll just expand on that a little bit for you. So before shelter in place with COVID-19 complications and before drought complications and us and our community having to haul water, I would actually put all of our reports in one, and I would PDF it and send it to the PO. And so I would let EPA separate out what reports that they needed, but our reports were in there. We had a section for GAP, we had a section for 106, and we had a section for 319. And I didn't do it under different tabs. I just put it all in one, so I always had it in one place. And that worked great. What helped is that if there are other people working on the other projects, they had to have things done so we could send it all at once. And I don't know how much Kate appreciated that. Maybe she did, or Nico. But when we entered into shelter in place with COVID-19, and then with us going into a drought situation, that all changed. We still get our reports in, but we had to be flexible with that. So you can, as Rob does, you still have to, and he's right, you still do reports for each one. How you submit them, I think, is up to you and your project officer. Like I said, for us, I put them all in one document because I wanted all to be in one place. And so when I sent it, and I would copy our PO for our PPG and then also the PO for the GAP, they had it and they can go through it. The one thing about that is that sometimes there's work that's done under general assistance and it overlaps into water, and they do scrutinize that, and it's so always be mindful of that. Thanks, Kate. She said it worked for her either way. I appreciate that. And they've been really, and honestly, with the PPGs in this year, and not being able to get some of our reporting in, I really appreciate Kate and Nico being flexible with us and working with us, because it's been really difficult. So, and honestly, I got the report template from Tim Wilhite. So when I needed some examples, he sent me 3 different templates that we could look at how we wanted to utilize. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so let me go back to this slide. Go ahead. Yeah, feel free to.
I say that. Yes, I would recommend, because these are big reports, like some of you are saying, that you utilize OneDrive. And that's one thing that EPA staff can access is OneDrive, which is nice. And trying to send it just via email, you'll get kickbacks with some of the things. And especially if you have water databases or things, if you have databases in with your report for water, it might have a difficult time sending. So if you have the ability to do a OneDrive and putting it in there and doing a share with your project officer, that works really good. At least it has for us, and it seems like it's worked well for others as well.
Yeah, and we use OneNote rather than OneDrive, but it's all still part of the Microsoft Office suite. And one of the really great things about a collaborative tool like something like that is just that people can be remote in different locations and still all work together on the one report, and then your product officer can access it easily whenever they want. You just don't have to send everything in an email. And then, like Nina's saying, it's very easy to attach large files or other things in with that as well.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to go back. I don't think we have to, we don't have to hover on every bullet point here, but I'll call out a couple that I think could use some extra explaining, and then you guys, if you could do the same. So just back to the most popular responses, everybody was talking about the flexibility of the budgets, and it's easier to work the budget. So maybe if one or all of you can kind of just give a quick explanation on what makes the budget more flexible or easier to work with in PPGs versus the individual grants.
I could do the budget flexibility.
Sure.
Well, last year, with the pandemic, there's different categories. We have our personnel costs, fringe, supply, travel. And for us, because we had the flexibility of moving funds from to other categories, travel with the pandemic, right? So we did pretty much no travel. So we're able to move some of those monies into other categories. Like, for example, supplies, because we had to purchase PPEs to do some of our gap tasks, for example. And yeah, that's probably my best example that I have. So
and you're able to move those across the grants too, right? Not just within each grant, but you can move
Correct.
them.
Correct. Combined.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I'd like to clarify is that for PPGs, there are a different set of regulations. And when grants, each grant you apply for, 106, GAP, 319, it has its own set of rules that kind of govern how, how the work is done under each grant. Well, a PPG also has rules about how that grant is managed. And when individual grants are placed into a PPG, it's kind of like states versus the federal government. Well, sometimes federal law trumps state law. So like in this case, PPG regulations kind of trump the individual program regulations. And so I'm wondering if maybe one of our very astute EPA colleagues might even be able to place into the chat a link to the CFR that really focuses on the PPG rules, and that might be something that if people are considering getting into a PPG, really take a look at the Code of Federal Regulations and what rules apply to PPGs. But as is being said, one of the things that I think is just wonderful about the PPG, certainly my CFO absolutely loves it because he has to do one annual financial report, one SF425 each year. He absolutely loves it. Now, when we apply for individual grants, and that's something when we get to that slide, Kerri, I'd like to focus on this a little bit more. You still apply for each grant individually. Now, I'd love to hear from my colleagues or anyone at EPA if it's been different for them, but my experience has been you still apply for your GAP grant. You apply for your 106, you apply for your 319, your 105, or whatever you have in there. But then at the end of, and in each application, you say, my intent is to roll this grant into a performance partnership grant. And then once all of your grant proposals and budgets and everything are approved, then you submit one final application for the PPG, and that's when you roll everything together. And then regarding the budgetary flexibility, once all these grants are in together, you can, as the course of the year is going on, if you find that, you are encountering some financial savings in, let's say, your GAP grant, but all of a sudden your YSI probe broke in your 106 grant and you don't have money in the 106 grant to purchase that new piece of equipment, well, you could actually utilize your money that's within the PPG because it's now all one budget. You can move money, I'll put move in quotation marks, move money from your GAP to your 106 to allow you to purchase that new piece of equipment. And it had been mentioned about the increase in the amount that you can move. Well, that really just goes back to the 10%. As most of us know, you can move 10% of your grant funds without prior approval from your PO. I still personally always inform my PO when I'm moving money and just make sure that it's good with them. But because all of your grants are lumped in together, rather than just say 100,000 for GAP, 100,000 for 106, 100,000 for the 319, you actually now have a $300,000 grant. So you can move 10% of that money, in other words, up to $30,000 without prior approval. Personally, I don't find that to be a big deal because I always inform my PO and always work with them, on moving grant funds around. But to me, the big deal is being able to move money from, say, my 106 or 319 grant to GAP or vice versa or to AIR. It just, to me, it kind of goes to the concept of environmental self-determination, which my colleague Vicki Flowers at the United Nations has really been promoting lately, as we've been talking about Indian self-determination and environmental justice and kind of combining that into an environmental self-determination. What I'd love to see, and I think the PPG partially gets there, is for the federal government to supply funding to tribes and let for environmental protection, and let the tribe determine where that funding is best utilized. To me, that's the concept of environmental self-determination, and a PPG helps us get partially there.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for that. So that was budget. Let me keep scrolling. Other popular responses. So I think this might be what you were getting into, Rob, about, or maybe this wasn't you. Easier reporting, reduced paperwork. That I don't even that might be outdated because everything's digital now. So when we say paperwork, we're just talking about the report, the additional or separate reports. I think reduced match. We actually haven't talked about that. I did want to make sure that we talked about that a little. And I'm not a PPG tribe, so I don't feel comfortable talking about all the terms. But it sounds like the match reduction has been waived, I believe. I don't know if there's a process that tribes have to go through to get that waived, or if it's just automatically waived. Does anybody do you guys know at all?
No, I'd love to have one of our EPA colleagues kind of
Mhm.
mention, discuss it, either throw it in the chat or maybe it can be brought up at another session. But as of
Kinda
October
clarify.
1st, as of October 1st, PPGs no longer require a match. So, so our new PPGs that just started this year, I've already budgeted a match in there. Oh, now I don't have a match. I don't have to worry about that. That's one less burden for me to deal with. We never put in a cash match. We always did an in-kind match through some of our tribal council time, CFO time, a donation of equipment, or things like that, materials. But now it's just one less thing to have to manage and track. So I would love to hear from, like Ryan Jones mentioned, it was automatically waived on October 1st. Yes. So I would imagine that our product offices will probably want us to submit revised budgets, taking that match out. That's what I'd love to hear.
Okay, so if anybody from EPA wants to comment that in the chat, we'll get to that. And I see some other chats here that we haven't even gotten to. So maybe I should take some time and read some of those.
Yeah, that's great to know. No match for PPG, because I believe, is it the 319? I mean, before that was a 40% match at one time. I'm not sure if it still is. Something else.
See, right. Angela mentioned that Julie Mazzano was going to be discussing that in the Show Me the Money grant session today. Julie Mazzano is an awesome person, so I really encourage everybody to attend that session if you have questions about that.
So it's right after this, looks like. And then I see a comment about the issues with the OneDrive. Not so much on PPG because I had the same issue before, but OneDrive, and I don't exactly see eye to eye. If I don't have connection, I sometimes can't access documents, so I guess that's a glitch for OneDrive. Okay, I think we can move on. Let's see.
Well, I did just want to touch base on Eileen's comment saying that, yes, there is flexibility when you can combine all funds together, but it's a lot of work to create the multiple budgets for each grant, and then have to combine them to create the PPG budget. I guess I would say, yeah, I agree. It is a lot of work. I don't know of a better way to do it. I still think that even if it is a PPG, you still have to determine what kind of budget you need for your water monitoring program or your air program or your GAP program. But it is a lot of work, and that is something that we've kind of struggled with. I'm very fortunate in that I have a colleague working with me, Frank Spurgeon, who's incredible with spreadsheets and loves budget numbers and has done an incredible job about putting it all together. But it can be a little bit complex. We have a master spreadsheet with each of our individual program budgets, and then our total PPG budget off to the right.
Okay, I think we already went about the percentage, the line items. This is a big one that fiscal only does one SF 424 for 3 grants. That's pretty huge.
25.
What was that?
424 is the application.
There's a big difference between an SF 424 and a 425, and this is the 425, which is the annual federal financial report.
424.
Right. Okay. says when making last minute changes or rolling in new or other grants, PPGs allow this through amendment only. So it sounds like it's pretty simple to add grants to your PPG as long as it's at the timeline. The timelines, the grant submission timeline needs to be followed, obviously, correct? Hello?
Sorry, Kerri, I was reading when you were talking, and I think I missed what you were. If you were asking us a question, can you repeat, please?
Oh, I'm just on the slide. You guys can still see it, right? I'm just referring to that last item there about rolling other grants into your PPG. That it's fairly simple. It sounds like.
Yeah, when we've applied for and received TAS for our air program, we moved from a 103 grant, which cannot be put into a PPG, to a 105 grant, which could be put into a PPG. And so all we had to do when we submitted that 105 application was say we wanted to put this into a PPG, and then add it in at the beginning of the new period. So yeah, very simple to do.
Okay, and when I have this up, I can't see the chat. Does anybody have questions about that?
Well, Tim Wilhite has been trying to help us clarify the match issue, and it sounds like the match waiver is not retroactive. It only applies to new grants that are awarded on or after October 1, 2021. So in my case, what I was saying is that my existing PPG, I can take the match out of it for this year. It sounds like actually that's not correct. It sounds like this will only apply to our FY23 grants. But we'll watch the chat for more clarity on that, and we'll attend Jolla Mazzano's session to learn more.
Right. Well, just a question then, just on that. How long is the life of the PPG? Is it end every year, or is it like a 4-year or a 5-year thing? 4 years, okay, or 5. Wow. So you'll have to wait till the end of that to have this apply, it sounds like, for the waiver to be.
I don't think so. We'll see what others say, but I mean, each year you have a new award. It's the same award number, but then there's that, dash 01, 01, 02. It's the amendment. Yeah, so I think it will apply to the new amendment.
Hopefully. Okay, and then I see somebody from EPA put up there was the site for the PPGs, the website, so that might have had some of the regulations that you were talking about, Rob. I'm trying to see who put it up there.
Yeah, John Herbst. Thanks, John.
John, and then Rachel, I believe, also put a link. So, okay, the NEPS link. Back, we got about 15, 20 minutes left. So let's go through. Okay, so yeah, the cons. Maybe since I remember one of the recommendations. If a tribe is thinking about going into PPGs, some of you said give it a try for a year, and then others said maybe group just similar media together and try it. Seems like the most popular challenge that I was hearing was just the lead project officer may not be familiar with some of the other grants, and that seemed like GAP seemed to be the one. The thorn in your side, but does anybody want to elaborate on that at all about that challenge? Like what kind of challenges?
I will. Yeah, so we have our 3 together, and the POs I have for all of them are great. But sometimes there's not I just think GAP is the one that doesn't really fit in with water. And so it seems that typically your POs tend to be out of the water program, and so I've gotten questions with things that I'm like, I don't, it makes me realize that they don't understand how GAP works, and so I've had to do a lot of back and forth on different things. We've always worked it out, and like I said, the PO is great, but for some tribes, they may not. And I'm just going to be transparent. They may have a better working relationship with their PO underwater than with GAP or vice versa. And if you put your thing into a PPG, your PO could be the person that you have more conflict with. So that's always something to be mindful of.
Is that?
But-
Oh, it might have been. I'm hearing background noise.
I
Are you guys hearing it? It's kind of hard to hear me.
32.
Is it one of us? I mean, we're the only. Right. I don't have anything on.
I just put my cell phones down. I have
It is just,
me.
it could possibly be me. I'll try to make sure that I mute in between. I live 5 minutes from the San Diego International Airport, and planes fly near my house, so I'm sorry if it's me. But I think that this is something that I did want to touch base on. I think this was something that all of us, Nina, Sam, and others that were participating in this, that we found was of some fair difference between the different tribes and how the PPGs are managed by EPA. And that I'll say from my experience, I still have, and I think with most other people's experience, I still have individual project officers. I have Howard Kahn as my clean water project officer, Kate is our clean air project officer, and Pam is our GAP project officer. Pam also serves as the PPG project officer. But I don't go to Pam if I have a question about our air program or our water program. I go directly to Kate or Howard. So I don't have a challenge with a product officer not knowing the media, because I still have all my media product officers and I go directly to them to work with them on that individual program. I think behind the scenes, they work together, they discuss things, they go over the quarterly reports together, they talk about things, but I still work with each of my individual product officers and have not had any challenges.
And I'm the same way with Rob. I don't really have any cons, Kerri, so nothing but pros. And I think having an experienced project officer helps to that.
Okay, great. Yeah, we want to hear all sides. So let me go back.
Yeah.
Let me see. We got 15 minutes. Okay.
So I just wanted, Denise asked a question like, how does the match requirement work if we are required to create/apply for individual grants that require a match, then roll them into a PPG? Do we take the match back out? How does the match work if we are required to create and apply for individual grants that require a match?
I had muted it. It's a plane flying over, you might hear it, but then Danielle had responded and said that when you apply for a grant with a required match, you mentioned that it will be awarded via a PPG, and don't put your match in your budget. Since you know you're going to roll that grant into a PPG, sounds like Danielle is saying that we don't even need to submit an initial budget with a match. So that would be awesome.
Oh, that comment didn't come up in my thing. Huh.
You have to press the little thing that says replies. So it starts with Denise McCracken, and then underneath that, there's a little thing that says replies, and it shows that Daniel replied.
Well, Kerri, I have a question for Danielle or any of the project officers on here.
Sure.
Like we're PPGs and we already submitted for this year, and October 1st, no match is needed. So do we need to do any correction on our work plans, budgets? Do we work with our finance officers? I mean, I'm trying to see what we need to do, if anything.
Well, it sounds like the reduced match requirement only applies to new grants that are awarded on or after October 1 of this year. So I don't think we need to go back and change anything in our current PPGs.
And it also, not to not get your question answered, Sam, but it sounds like they're going to address more of that in the next session as well. But if anybody from EPA has a quick answer to that, that would be great in the chat there.
Danielle also had put something in a little bit ago when we were talking about adding programs. She mentioned that there is a nuance there. So let's say your PPG can run up to 5 years. If you are in your 4th year of your PPG, you only have 1 year left in it, right? What if you then want to put in a grant that has a 2-year time period? You're going to hit that maximum 5 years of the PPG. So that could be a nuance if you're trying to add in a 2-year grant and there's only 1 year left in your PPG. You may not be able to do that. You might need to wait till the next year to add it in when you start a new PPG, or perhaps you could take that 2-year grant, convert it into 2 1-year grants. I don't know. But yeah, that would be a nuance.
Okay.
And it sounds like Kate and Angela are agreeing that yes, it's correct. It's not retroactive, so it's not going to affect our current FY22, right, grants. It will only affect our FY23 grants. So like for me, as I go to apply for 106, 319 and this year, I won't need to put any matches in those budgets because they're all going to be rolled into a PPG. Great. Sorry, muted. And Kate made a really good comment there in that in the example that I just shared, that she would suggest that you end the PPG in the 4th year and start a new PPG with a new tier grant. Of course, thank you, Kate. Of course, I should have thought of that. And that's to clarify, your PPG does not have to run 5 years. It can, but it does not have to. You can end it after 1, 2, 3, 4. So yeah.
So you don't really, that's always changeable, it sounds like. Even if you go into it thinking it's going to be a 5-year, you can always change that date. Is that what I'm hearing?
From my understanding, yes. Yeah, you're not locked into, oh my God, I've signed up for a PPG. Now I'm locked into it for 5 years. No, like in the examples in one of the slides that we have, Kerri, it mentions that you can get out of your PPG at any time. Well, but of course it's at the end of the year. You can't just do it midterm, but at the end of that fiscal year, you could say, nope, don't want to be in the PPG anymore, or I want to take this program out. Like Nina, really likes to only have just certain media types of programs in PPGs. And folks, and my colleagues and the EPA and tribal colleagues, I'm trying to remember, I think a tribe is only allowed to have one PPG at a time. Is that correct? Or could you have one PPG with your water programs into it and say another PPG with your, I don't know, gap and air or something like that? I'm not too sure about that.
Okay, so yeah, if there's any EPA that can answer that question, if you can put it in the chat. The closing out, we kind of talked about that a little bit, and is everybody okay with that? There was a comment that it could be difficult closing them out at different times, and I think EPA had come forward at that presentation and said, they can have soft closeouts so that they're not all having to end at the same time. And these were just suggestions for improvements from the tribal perspective. Just so we can get these out there. There was a suggestion for a standalone PPG section. I know that came up in, I want to say EPA, it wasn't something that they committed to doing. Didn't sound like good suggestion. Let's see. Yeah, expanding the list for PPG grants, for the list for grants eligible to go into PPGs. The soft closeouts I already went over. Making grants.gov easier to manage. I know that grants.gov really isn't developed by EPA, correct? And so I'm not sure how much influence they'd have even on changing that. And then, like Nina has talked about, grouping similar media together. Does anybody have any extra comments on this slide?
Well, I just want to clarify that in the chat, our EPA colleagues have clarified that, yes, if you wish to have multiple PPGs, you certainly can do so. Great. You just simply cannot overlap activities or funds.
So they'd be with different grants. Sounds like. Okay.
Just check the chat for some different comments from Danielle and Destiny and Angela.
Example, thank you, EPA staff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So should I read? I'll just read them. For example, one water only PPG and one that has gap and air. And yeah, like Rob said, you can't overlap. Great. Okay, so let's try to get through the rest of this and then we can just be free to speak. Yeah, most popular response. It sounds like, you guys are all happy. I know your guys are not the only tribes that were interviewed, but everybody seemed overall happy with their PPGs, recommending that tribes understand the process before entering, know what the regulations and terms are. And then one of you said, maybe take it on a test drive for a year. And if you don't like it, it's not like you're, obligated to stay in it. Yeah. Any extra comments on this panel?
Well, I'm just noticing it's 10:50, so I believe our session is ending now. Let's see, there was one comment I was going to make, and now it just jumped out of my head. So
Before we leave, I just thought about this. I'm not a fan of grants.gov that much. It's always a pain in the butt to look for a workspace to fill out your application. But with the PPG, at least with my project officer, PPG, you just submit the draft to your project officers. And then once you get the final amount, then you go on grants.gov and do your final application. But I think if you don't have a PPG, you have to submit your proposal to grants.gov and as well as your final, if that's correct. What I've been told, anyway.
I think my final comment I was going to make is, I think there had been someone had a suggestion, maybe a different section at EPA to manage PPGs. I think that would just kind of add more complexity. And my suggestion would just be, as I made earlier, I just think that everybody, both tribes that are either interested in a PPG or have a PPG, as well as any EPA project officer who is helping to manage a PPG, really needs to go through the CFR and really understand the Code of Federal Regulations as it applies to the PPGs. That's where you'll really find those nitty-gritty details. So I would make that suggestion for anybody considering it.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being on here. I appreciate it and helping me go through the questions and all of that. So I don't know if you guys are open to having people reach out to you. If you are, maybe put your email in the chat, and if people had other questions and when they're making decisions to enter PPGs. And yeah, so great. Well, thanks everyone.